A non-Muslim asks you, why does God need us to worship Him? Can God create a four-sided triangle? Can God create a rock that is so big that no living thing can move it? And can He move it? السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. So we're going to talk about techniques and ways of answering questions. And one of the golden rules before you answer a question is you fix the question. Because if you just accept the premise of a question, you put yourself at a disadvantage. And if you don't fix the question first, there's no way you can answer it properly. Let's look at the examples we've taken already. Why does God need us to worship Him? And many times, as an exercise, I'll ask the Muslims, I'll tell, okay, a non-Muslim asks you, why does God need us to worship Him? And people put their hands up. And one guy said, Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ I had not created the jinn or the humans except that they should worship me. Wrong answer. Another guy, well, God is so great that He's deserving of being worshipped. Wrong answer. No matter how you answer this question, you're wrong and you answered it incorrectly. No matter how fancy you are, you answered it incorrectly. Because the question was, why does God need us to worship Him? And you're supposed to fix the question before answering it. Because if you answer it, you're saying, this is why He needs us to worship Him. And this is why He needs us to worship Him. But He doesn't. So first thing, you fix the question. So you say, well, He doesn't need us to worship Him. But He commanded us to worship Him because, and then you give whatever answer you want to give, it's not a problem. But you have to fix the question first. And that's the golden rule when it comes to answering questions. First, fix the question. If you accept the premise that they've given you, you're going to put yourself at a huge disadvantage. The other question was, can God create a four-sided triangle? Don't even waste time with a question like this. What's a four-sided triangle? There's no such thing as a four-sided triangle. That would be a square, a rectangle, parallelogram, whatever, diamond shape even, but triangle? So if someone says something like that, tell them, well, I don't know where you studied math, but if it has more than three sides, it's not a triangle anymore. That's it. Why would you put yourself in that position? Some people try to, be champions. No, God can create a five-sided triangle and He could create it inside your eyeball. What are you talking about? Answer is no. Scholars even openly say it. God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does not do impossibilities. That's it. Don't be afraid to say that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not do impossibilities. Can God kill Himself? Allah doesn't do impossibilities. And Allah can't be killed. Look, never put yourself in a position where you have to answer a question where two things are against each other. Can God be moving and absolutely still at the same time? Again, these are impossibilities. And if someone's intelligent, they wouldn't even ask you a question like this to begin with. And if the da'i is intelligent, they won't entertain a question like this either. So we've got that down. First, fix the question before you just start answering it. The second thing, another technique for answering questions is that you can flip the question around. Flip the question around and it will help them understand either why it was a bad question or it might answer the question for them. I want to give an example from the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah, when this fitna that was created during his time, this trial about the creation of the Quran. So it was a group of people that kept saying the Quran is created. And he actually was the one debating the scholars of the Mu'tazila, the group that had this deviant belief that the Quran is created and you have to say the Quran is created. And scholars were put in jail and scholars were killed over this issue, that they had to proclaim that the Quran was not the speech of Allah, but it was the creation. And Imam Ahmad, in this opinion of all the scholars and of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, is that the Quran is the speech of Allah. Allah spoke the Quran, and we have this in ayat that say it. حَتَّى يَسْمَعَ كَلَامَ Allah is in the Quran. This is the speech of Allah. But this group said no. Why did they object to it? Initially, they were trying to respect Allah. They said Allah is qadim. Qadim is something that's ancient or it's been there for a long time. And speech is a renewable characteristic. Now, according to their logic, they thought that it doesn't make sense that a being that is qadim would have an attribute that's renewable. That's one problem they had. Their other problem was that Allah says about himself in the Quran, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Nothing is like him. Nothing is comparable to him. And if you speak and Allah speaks, that makes you like Allah, which goes against this verse. Of course, this is very, very poor logic. If Allah speaks and you speak, it doesn't mean you're like Allah. If you have an eye and the whale has an eye, it means you have the same eye? No, the whale has an eye that befits that creature and your eye befits you. So Allah speaks in a way that befits His Majesty, you speak in a way that befits you. So it's poor logic to begin with. But they said Allah doesn't speak just because we speak. So Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he wanted to convince them, and he did it by flipping it around. He'll mention some other attributes and say, okay, now what about this? At one point he was debating with in his jail cell with one of the scholars of the Mu'tazila. So he says to him, you have knowledge. Does Allah have knowledge? Because the Mu'tazila, their way out of it is to say Allah created it. He doesn't speak, but He created the Quran. So now he said, okay, well, you have knowledge, and you're saying we can't be like Allah. So if you have knowledge, does Allah have knowledge? Or are you going to tell me that Allah's knowledge is also created? And guess what? The guy said, yes, Allah's knowledge is created. So Imam Ahmad tells him, kafart. You've disbelieved. Because how can Allah create His own knowledge? His knowledge is created. That means there was a point before it was created where He didn't have any knowledge. And how could He have created His knowledge when He didn't have any knowledge? But when Imam Ahmad tells him kafart, the guard that was standing there got angry at the Imam. He doesn't know what the debate's going. He doesn't have knowledge, so he's lost in the debate. But when he tells the man kafart, you have left Islam, he says to the prisoner Imam Ahmad, how dare you? This is the messenger of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Khalifa, the Caliph. How could you say that to him? And then Imam Ahmad explained it to this guard. He said, this man is saying that Allah's knowledge is created, which means at some point he didn't have knowledge, and then even though he didn't have knowledge, he created his own knowledge with no knowledge. And he said the guard, he narrates that the guard got really upset, and he started giving this man dirty looks. Like, how could you say something like that? Even a simple guard got it. So Imam Ahmad used logic, and then, okay, now flip that. If you're going to say Allah didn't have knowledge, it's going to be a big problem for you. He also did it another similar way, and that kind of towards the end of this problem. And this problem was a major problem. It continued throughout the time of 3 different caliphs. So they brought him in. It was almost like a questioning. They bring him in every day and they debate with him and everything. So they brought him in. It was one of the other days of this. And the Khalifa says, how were you in your cell last night, Ya Ahmad? Imam Ahmad says, I was good, alhamdulillah, except that I made wudu and I got up and I prayed the first rak'ah. Then when I got up for the second rak'ah, I wanted to recite Surah Al-Fatiha, but I couldn't. As much as I tried to recite Al-Fatiha, I wasn't able to. And then I looked in the corner of the room and the cell, the prison cell, and I found the Quran laying down dead. So the Khalifa yelled at him. He said, woe to you, and does the Quran die? He said, that's what you say. You say that the Quran was created, and everything that's created comes to an end or dies. And last night the Quran came to an end and it died. So I washed the Quran and I shrouded it and I prayed over it. Now, something interesting. You might think this is a very simple kind of response, and Imam Ahmad used to give him some heavy scholarly responses. But Al-Khalifa Al-Wathiq, this Khalifa, he was like a militant, military kind of guy, not very educated, not academic. And sometimes when someone is simple up here, it's a simple response that gets him. So when he heard that, he kept saying, Qaharana Ahmad, Qaharana Ahmad, Ahmad has destroyed us. So he got them with a simple answer, but it was just basically reversing, flipping their argument around. If I apply what you're saying to everything else, we're going to have a problem. Sometimes you flip it around by showing that if I reverse what you're saying, it's going to be worse than what you're trying to avoid. For example, Muslims who have said that Allah is not on His throne, which is a very strange thing to say, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows Himself. And He said He's on His throne 6 times in the Quran. And yet, someone who's never left this earth, okay, will come and tell you, no, it doesn't mean that. Okay, so you're telling me what Allah said about Himself, and you're fixing it and changing it to something else now. So the point is that Allah is on His throne. This is the belief of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah and the scholars of past, that Allah is on His throne. He said that in the Quran, and many things indicate where Allah is, like the direction. The slave girl pointed up. That she said, "Where is Allah?" The Prophet ﷺ asked her, "Where is Allah?" She went like this. All right, and Allah mentions in the Quran, "Ilayhi yas'adu al-kalimu at-tayyib." To Him ascend the good words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Anzalna," and we sent down. Suratun anzalnaha, we sent it down. Nuzul, something descending from a high place to a low place. And Allah says in the Quran, يَخَافُونَ رَبَّهُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ. They fear their Lord above them. So much evidence, should be clear. But yet some people will say no. Okay, what's your problem with Allah being on His throne? If you say Allah is on His throne, listen carefully and see how it sounds like they're respecting Allah. If you say Allah is on His throne, you are limiting Allah to one location, to one place. Okay, use our technique. Flip it around. I'm going to take your same argument. If Allah is not in one place, then that means He is physically everywhere, in every place. That's the opposite of it. And that leads you to problems and problematic ideas. So you're saying then that God is inside what? Churches and nightclubs and places that you don't even want to go into. He's inside everything. And that's why we have historically in Islamic history, some people wrote poetry saying that basically they thought God was inside them and inside the dog and the pig and the monk in the monastery. Why would a Muslim say something like that? Because of this bad idea. When you flip it around, it becomes a nightmare. And that's why you ask them, is God inside the church? And they're quiet. In the bar, they're quiet. The nightclub, they're quiet. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is far removed from all of that. So flip the question around and they might get to see what is wrong with the question to begin with, or it might give them the answer very quickly and very easily. Try that technique. Sallallahu barak ala Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.